What happens when a self-made CEO trades his tailored suit for a faded apron, and hears his own employee mock an elderly customer? Xavier Stenson stood in front of the bathroom mirror in a run-down motel just outside the city. He barely recognized the man staring back, gray stubble, wiry hair tucked under a baseball cap, and a faded red polo shirt with a name tag that read Ray. It was the perfect disguise. 17 fast food locations. That's what he'd built with his own hands over the last 13 years. From a food truck to a regional chain. But lately, something felt off. Sales at a few stores had dipped. Customer reviews at location number 9 on the south side were getting nastier, not about the food, about the people. He tried talking to the store manager, but she brushed it off as just some grumpy customers. The district manager said the same thing. But Xavier had a gut feeling they weren't seeing the whole picture, so he decided to see it for himself. He hadn't personally visited Store 9 in over 2 years. Most of the staff there were hired after that. None of them had ever met him. And thanks to corporate's new third-party hiring system for lower-level roles, nobody would question a new trainee named Ray sent in for on-the-job evaluation. He stepped into the store just after 9 a.m. It was already busy senior breakfast rush. The place looked clean enough. A tall supervisor in his early 30s barked orders behind the counter. His name tag said Bryce. He didn't smile once. A young woman at the register glanced at Xavier and gave a small wave. "You must be Ray, I'm Mayla, you're shadowing me today." "Right." "First day," Xavier said, keeping his voice a little rougher, older. Mayla was fast, polite, and patient. She handled a long line without rushing a single person. Xavier kept quiet, watching how she moved, how she greeted the older customers by name. An elderly man with a cane shuffled up to the counter. "1 small coffee and the number 2, eggs soft, please." "Of course, Mr. Harold," Mayla said warmly. "You want jelly with your toast," Harold nodded, smiling. As she rang up the order, Bryce leaned toward a younger crew member and said in a low yet audible voice, "Why's this old fossil still coming here? He probably forgets he already ate." The kid chuckled. "He's here like every day," Bryce laughed. "Maybe he thinks this is the pharmacy." Xavier froze. He watched Harold's face twitch just for a second. The old man didn't say anything. He just took his receipt and moved to the side. Mayla turned stiffly toward Bryce. "That wasn't funny," Bryce waved her off. "Relax, the guy's ancient. Can barely hear anyway." Xavier's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything, not yet. He needed to see more. The next few hours were a blur of orders, spills, and burned hash browns. Mayla never lost her cool. She covered for another worker who was late. She even fixed a drive-through order Bryce had messed up without snapping back. Xavier noticed something else Bryce rarely helped. He leaned on the counter, scrolled on his phone, and only jumped in when the district manager, Greg, stopped by. As soon as Greg walked in, Bryce straightened up, threw on a fake grin, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Morning, boss. We've been swamped, but the team's killing it. Ray's doing great." Greg gave a thumbs up and left within 5 minutes. The moment the door shut, Bryce muttered, "What a clown." By the afternoon, Xavier had seen enough. He stepped outside for a break, pacing near the dumpster out back. His chest felt tight. He had trusted his managers. He had trusted the system. But watching an old man get humiliated like that, and seeing a good worker like Mayla get dismissed, lit something in him. He went back in and watched the dinner shift roll in. Mayla finally took her break, sitting alone with a granola bar and a soda. Xavier slid into the booth across from her. "You always cover for people like that?" he asked. She looked up, surprised. "Like what?" "Like Bryce. He doesn't help, treats customers like garbage. You clean up his messes." She shrugged. "He's the supervisor." "That doesn't make it right." Mayla paused. "There's not much I can do. I need the hours. I've got rent and my little brother's with me now." Xavier nodded, silent. He felt the weight of that. He used to be her, scraping by, doing the job no one else wanted. Another moment passed. "Can I tell you something?" he said. She gave a cautious glance. "Sure. I own this place, Mayla blinked. What? He pulled off his cap. My name's Xavier Stenson. I started this company from the back of a truck 13 years ago. I've got 17 stores now. But I think I forgot to check on the people who actually keep them running. Mayla stared at him, stunned. I went undercover because I didn't trust the reports I was getting, and today proved I was right. She looked down, then back up. So, what now? Xavier stood up. Now. I'm going to finish this shift. But tomorrow morning, Bryce is going to have a very different kind of conversation, and you, he paused, you're going to get everything you've earned and more. Mayla's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them away quickly, nodding. And Xavier turned back toward the kitchen, fire in his step, because this wasn't just about Harold. It was about rebuilding the soul of what he'd created. One store at a time, Xavier arrived an hour before opening the next morning. The parking lot was empty except for a dull gray sedan parked crooked across two spaces. Inside, the lights were half on. A lone prep cook named Lewis was chopping onions in the back, earbuds in, moving with practiced rhythm. The scent of raw vegetables and fryer oil hung in the air. Xavier stepped through the side door and nodded toward Lewis, who didn't notice him. He made his way to the small office, unlocked it with his master key, and sat down in the chair that Bryce usually occupied. He didn't lean back. He didn't need to get comfortable. At 6:30, the front door clicked open. Bryce came in wearing the same branded polo, his badge slightly crooked, a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. He didn't see Xavier right away. When he finally did, he stopped short in the hallway, squinting. You lost? Bryce asked, voice casual. Xavier folded his hands on the desk. Close the door. Bryce's smile faltered. Wait, who? I said close the door. The weight in Xavier's voice snapped the last bit of arrogance off Bryce's face. He stepped inside and shut it. I'm Xavier Stenson, Xavier said. I own this company. Sit. Bryce looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. He sat. Xavier didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Yesterday morning, he said, you made a joke about a customer who's been coming here longer than you've had a job. You did it in front of staff, loudly. You humiliated someone who trusts this place enough to spend the little bit of money he has here. Bryce opened his mouth, but Xavier raised a hand. You don't speak yet. You listen. Bryce shut his mouth. I watched you ignore rushes, scroll through your phone, and let your team clean up your mistakes. I watched how fast you changed when Greg walked in. I watched you pretend. I don't care if you think you're clever. I care that you made people around you feel smaller. Bryce's eyes darted to the wall, then back. Look, I didn't mean it like that. It was just I said don't speak. Xavier stood. He didn't pace. He didn't need movement to make his point. You're done here. Effective now. Your final check will be mailed. Don't come back. Bryce stood too, face flushed. Are you serious? Over some harmless? Xavier stepped closer. You really think it was harmless? Bryce stared at him, jaw tight, but didn't answer. Leave your keys on the desk. Bryce pulled the lanyard from his pocket and dropped it with a clatter. His footsteps echoed down the hallway as he left. Xavier waited until the front door shut again before he exhaled through his nose. Then he picked up the store phone and dialed. Greg, it's Xavier. I need you at store 9 in 20 minutes. Bring a notepad and leave your excuses at the door. He hung up before Greg could respond. By 7:30, Mayla walked in, looking surprised to see him behind the counter. I thought you were just shadowing, she said cautiously. I was. She glanced toward the office. Is Bryce not? He's not coming back. Her eyes flicked over his face, searching for something. He didn't offer reassurance. He didn't offer praise, just facts. She nodded slowly. Okay, I need your help, he said. Not forever, just today. We're running without a supervisor, and I trust you more than anyone else in this building. I'm not trained on shift lead. You don't need a title to lead. You just need to know how to treat people. She said nothing, but walked past him and started checking the prep list. Greg arrived 5 minutes later, out of breath, tie askew. What's going on? He asked, stepping into the office. Xavier didn't look up from the tablet displaying the store's last 30 days of customer feedback. You've been collecting reports from this location for months, he said. and somehow missed one of your leads completely disrespecting a customer in open air. Greg hesitated. Bryce never mentioned anything. None of the complaints referenced him by name. That's your job, Greg, to connect dots. Not wait for someone to spell it out. I can start doing random audits. You should have started already. Greg shifted. What do you want me to do? Xavier turned the tablet toward him. These are the employees worth keeping. These are the ones who have had consistent delays, attitude issues, or unexplained absences. I want you to schedule one-on-ones with every single member of this team by end of week, and I want written evaluations, not checkboxes. Greg nodded quickly. And starting next month, you're rotating through stores for 2-day stints. No clipboard, no assistant, just you in uniform working beside them. Greg blinked. You want me to? Yes, that's all. He left Greg in the office and walked back to the front. Mayla was walking a trainee through the register system, explaining how to fix a double entry without needing a manager override. She spoke clearly without sounding superior. The kid actually looked like he was listening. The lunch crowd started spilling in by 11. Xavier manned the fryer. It had been years since he'd done it, but his hands remembered. He didn't care about the grease or the heat. He cared that the food came out right, that the line moved, that customers didn't stand around looking confused. A woman with 2 toddlers approached the counter. One was crying. The other clutched a crumpled dollar. Mayla leaned down and said something quiet that made both kids smile. She swapped out the spilled drink without asking questions and handed over an extra napkin. Xavier caught the mother's eyes. She mouthed, "Thank you." After the rush, he pulled Mayla aside near the dry storage. I need someone who's not afraid to speak up, who doesn't wait for a badge to do what's right. I'm not offering you a promotion because of what happened. I'm offering it because of who you already are. She looked at him carefully. What kind of promotion? Assistant manager. Full training, higher pay, benefits kick in after 30 days. You'd be leading part of the hiring process too. Her brow furrowed. I've never done interviews. You'll learn, and I'll make sure you get every resource to succeed. She didn't smile, she just nodded once. I'll take it. Xavier held out his hand. She shook it, firm grip, no hesitation. That evening, after the store closed, Xavier walked through the dining area. It was quiet now. The booths were clean. The lights buzzed low. He sat at the same table Harold had used the day before. The receipt from his breakfast was still tucked behind one of the salt shakers, folded into a neat triangle. He picked it up and stared at the timestamp. There was a knock on the glass. Harold stood outside in a windbreaker, holding a paper bag. Xavier opened the door. I was walking by, Harold said. Thought maybe I'd drop this off. Leftovers from my daughter's kitchen. Too much soup. Xavier took the bag. It was warm. Thank you, he said. Harold nodded. That new girl, she's good. She is. Harold adjusted his collar. Place feels different today. Xavier looked around. It should. They stood in silence for a moment. Harold tipped his hat and walked off into the evening. Xavier stood there a while longer, holding the bag, listening to the quiet hum of the building. There was still work to do. But the foundation was still strong. The people were still worth investing in, and he wasn't going to forget that again. The following Monday, Xavier arrived at the regional office just after sunrise. He hadn't stepped foot in that building in over 4 months. The place was quiet, the usual hum of keyboards and murmured meetings still an hour away. That was exactly how he wanted it. He needed time to think. He sat in the back of the small conference room, staring at the whiteboard filled with color-coded schedules and monthly sales targets. The numbers weren't terrible, but they didn't tell the real story. A company could hit its margins and still lose its identity. He pulled out a legal pad and began listing names. Not of executives or franchise leads, he already knew them too well. These were frontline employees he'd met during his time undercover. Not just Mayla. A dishwasher in store 6 who worked double shifts with no complaints. A night cashier in store 12 who brought her own cleaning supplies because the store's budget had been slashed. He'd missed too much. Let routines and reports replace instincts. The outer door creaked open. Greg stepped in, holding 2 coffees and looking like he hadn't slept much. He set one in front of Xavier without asking. "I did the first round of interviews," Greg said, taking the seat across from him. "Finished all of Store 9's team. You were right about the gaps." Xavier leaned back. "What gaps?" Morale's low. "Turnovers higher than I thought. A few of them said they'd been covering for Bryce's mistakes for months. One even said she considered quitting last week but stayed because of Mayla." Xavier tapped the end of his pen against the pad. "What about the hiring process? You still letting managers bring on friends without vetting?" Greg hesitated. "Sometimes. It's faster." "Fast doesn't mean smart," Xavier said. "I want a full audit of every hire made in the last 6 months, cross-check it with performance. If there's a pattern, I want it broken." Greg nodded. "I'll get the data pulled." "I don't want data. I want names, dates, and outcomes." Greg looked down. "Understood." Xavier set the pad aside. "There's going to be a shift in how we operate, and not just at Store 9. Greg raised an eyebrow. "You planning to go undercover again?" "No," Xavier said. "That's not the point. I shouldn't need a disguise to find the truth. The structure should surface it. If it doesn't, the structure's broken." He stood and walked to the window. The city was waking up. Traffic lights flickered. The skyline was wrapped in a haze of early sun. "I want field reports submitted by employees, not filtered through managers. An anonymous channel, simple form, no more gatekeeping feedback." Greg leaned forward. "You think they'll use it?" "They will if we show we're listening." Greg didn't argue. That afternoon, Xavier returned to Store 9 not in disguise, and not for a surprise visit. He came to sit in the break room with the staff during shift change. The room was cramped, with a dented vending machine humming in the corner and a bench that creaked under pressure. A few employees looked startled when he walked in, but he offered no speech, no announcement. Just took a seat near the wall and waited. Mayla entered carrying a clipboard and glanced around before sitting down across from him. She wore a different expression now, less guarded, more focused. "You planning to do this at all the stores?" she asked. "Maybe," Xavier said. "Depends how this one goes." A teenager in a drive-through headset leaned against the vending machine. "So, you're really the owner?" Xavier nodded. "Okay. Then can I ask why we only get 2 uniforms but have to work 5 days? Mayla shot the kid a look, but Xavier raised a hand. "No, that's fair," he said. "You should have gotten 3. That's on us. Budget cuts went too deep." "I'm fixing it this week." Another employee, a woman in her 40s with a name tag that read Jeline, spoke up. "What about the fryer? Been leaking oil for weeks. We keep reporting it." Xavier turned to Mayla. "Is that true?" She nodded. "Maintenance ticket got submitted twice." No response. Xavier pulled out his phone and typed a note. "I'll follow up personally. If it's not fixed in 72 hours, we replace it." The room went quiet again. Then, slowly, more hands raised. Questions about supply shortages, scheduling gaps. Even the broken soap dispenser in the restroom, Xavier didn't interrupt. He didn't defend the company. He just wrote everything down. After 20 minutes, he stood. "I'm not here to score points," he said. "I'm here because I forgot something important. No matter how big this company gets, it only works if you believe it's worth showing up for. I let layers build between us. That's changing now." He walked out without waiting for applause. There wasn't any, just quiet acknowledgement. The next morning, while reviewing vendor contracts, Xavier received a message from Jeline. She'd used the new anonymous report system to send a photo of the fryer. The oil leak had worsened overnight and someone had slipped. No injury, but it was the 3rd close call. He called the equipment supplier directly and canceled the repair ticket. Ordered a full replacement. Paid the rush fee. By the end of the week, it was installed. Jeline sent another message, this time just a thumbs-up photo of the new machine. Xavier didn't reply. He didn't want it to become about him. That Friday, he met with the other regional owners. There were 4 of them, each managing multiple stores under the brand. They sat around a polished table in a minimalist coworking space, sipping bottled water and flipping through quarterly reports. "You've been off-grid lately," one of them, a man named Deshawn, said. "Heard you fired a supervisor without notice." "I did," Xavier said. "Over what? Disrespecting a customer." Deshawn frowned. "That's a tight leash." Xavier looked at him. It wasn't the first time. It was just the first time someone in charge paid attention. Another partner, Elena, leaned in. "You think we're all missing stuff like that? I think if none of us are in stores more than once a quarter, we're not seeing anything." They shifted in their seats. Xavier continued. "I'm not asking you to go undercover, but I am asking for 3 days a month in uniform, no meetings, just work the floor." Deshawn shook his head. "That's not scalable. It's not about scale, it's about culture. You can't outsource that." Elena studied him. "You really think this changes anything long-term?" "It already has," Xavier said. "And if it doesn't continue, we're building something hollow." The room fell quiet. Later, as he walked back to his car, Xavier spotted a familiar figure across the parking lot. It was Harold, seated on a bench outside a pharmacy, sipping from a paper cup. A bag of medication sat beside him. Xavier crossed the lot. Harold looked up. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same." Harold patted the bench. "Sit if you've got a minute." Xavier did. They sat in silence for a moment. Harold tilted his head. "That girl Mayla, she's running the place now." "She's leading it, yeah." "Good," Harold said. "Place feels different, not louder, just steadier." Xavier nodded slowly. "That's what we're aiming for." Harold took another sip. "People remember how you make them feel. That's the only part that sticks." Xavier didn't respond. He didn't need to. He sat there until the sun dipped below the buildings and the streetlights buzzed to life. The following month, Store 9 looked and felt like a completely different place. The changes hadn't come from a renovation or a rebranding campaign. There were no new signs, no flashy slogans. But the air carried a quiet steadiness, like something fractured had been braced and repaired by hands that understood what it once felt like to build from scratch. Inside the break room, a new schedule hung on the corkboard. It was cleaner, more balanced. No one was clocking 6 straight closing shifts anymore. Mayla stood near the fridge, clipboard tucked under her arm, reviewing a delivery log with Louis, who'd just been promoted to kitchen lead. His English was limited, but she spoke slowly, pointing to specific line items until he nodded with confidence. "Next week, we're switching vendors for the eggs," she said. "Less breakage and they're giving us a better rate on bulk." Louis tapped the list. "We still get same delivery day, Tuesday mornings, but I'll text the route manager if anything shifts." Louis gave a thumbs up and returned to the prep station. Xavier stood just outside the hallway, arms crossed, watching the exchange unfold without stepping in. He wasn't there to supervise. He was there to listen. He stepped into the kitchen and grabbed a pair of gloves from the dispenser. The morning crew had called in short, and the register was already backed up. He fell into the rhythm, handling orders without needing to ask what button did what. Even now, years removed from the line, he still remembered how to read the flow of a breakfast rush. After the wave passed, he grabbed a towel and started wiping down the front counter. The regulars were trickling in. Some he recognized by face now, others by cadence. A woman in a navy windbreaker who always split one biscuit meal between her twins. A former bus driver who counted exact change before ordering. Then Harold walked in. He wasn't using his cane this time. Still slow, but more upright. He scanned the counter, spotted Xavier, and gave a short nod before stepping into line. "Coffee's fresh," Xavier said as Harold reached the front. Harold chuckled. "I'd hope so. I taught you how to make it last month. I've been practicing." "Could have fooled me." "Last week someone gave me decaf." Xavier turned to Mayla. "We have a traitor among us." She didn't look up from the training packet she was reviewing. "Tell Harold he's lucky I didn't charge him extra." Harold grinned, then leaned closer to Xavier. "You know, this place used to be just a stop for me. Routine. Something to fill the time. And now," Harold's eyes flicked toward the kitchen where Louis was handing off a plate to a young trainee. "Now it feels like something's holding." Xavier poured his coffee and slid it across the counter. "Appreciate you saying that." After Harold found a seat, Xavier stepped back into the kitchen, where the district manager, Greg, was leaning against the cooler with a clipboard of his own. He wore a faint sheen of sweat on his brow. He'd been working the register for the past hour and had the posture of someone who wasn't used to standing that long. "Back hurts yet?" Xavier asked. Greg nodded. "Didn't know this floor was made of stone. Better than learning it in front of a line of high schoolers." Greg handed over a paper. "I finished the audit." Xavier looked it over. The report detailed turnover trends, employee satisfaction scores from a new internal survey, and a breakdown of incident logs. One line caught his eye. "What's this about store 13? Greg grimaced. "Similar issues to what you saw here." "Different manager, same behavior. I already flagged it. We're handling it before it gets worse." "Good." Greg folded his arms. Mayla's name came up a lot, not just here. Other stores are asking how she runs her onboarding. She's not just managing people. She's building trust. I noticed. Xavier turned to the monitor displaying the drive-through queue. It was moving smoother than it had in weeks. "You think the others are ready to step in like you did?" Greg asked. "They will be," Xavier said. "We're not going to let distance turn into blindness again." Greg shifted his weight. "You ever think about just stepping back altogether, letting the system run itself?" Xavier shook his head. "Systems fail, people don't if you give them a reason not to." Greg didn't argue. Later that afternoon, Xavier walked into the small office tucked behind the dry storage shelves. Mayla sat at the desk, typing up a performance review for one of the newer hires. Her posture was relaxed, but her tone was focused as she spoke into the recorder. Strong customer interactions. "Needs support with time management, recommending 2 additional shadow shifts before approving register clearance." She clicked stop and turned to Xavier. "You ever think about making these digital?" she asked. "Everything sounds better when spoken, helps avoid the corporate tone." "I guess. Just feels weird talking into a mic. You'll get used to it." She leaned back in the chair, stretching her legs. "We got an email from a woman who came in last week," she said. "Said the girl on drive-through remembered her son's allergy without her asking. Said it made her cry in the car." Xavier nodded. "That's the kind of thing we can't put in a spreadsheet." Mayla looked at him. "You ever worry about it slipping again?" "Like we fix it now, but a year from now it all starts fading." "I do." "So what's the plan?" He reached into the drawer and pulled out a small black notebook. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, names, times, things he'd witnessed during his weeks undercover. He flipped to the last page and handed it to her. "You're part of it," he said. "You keep people honest, you teach the next Mayla, and when they're ready, you show them how to do the same." She flipped through it silently, then closed the notebook and set it on the desk. "I'll hold the line," she said, not as a promise, but as a fact. That evening, the store hosted its first team dinner. Nothing extravagant. Just folding tables pulled together in the dining area after closing and trays of catered food from a local place owned by one of Xavier's oldest friends. No speeches, just laughter, inside jokes, and a playlist chosen by the crew. Xavier didn't sit at the head of the table. He sat in the middle between the new dish crew and the night shift runner who just passed her probation week. He listened more than he spoke. At one point, Lewis stood and raised his soda can. "For the boss who knows how to use the fryer," he said, grinning. Laughter moved through the room like a wave. Mayla raised hers next. "And for the customers who never stopped showing up even when we weren't always worth showing up for." Xavier lifted his without saying anything. As the night wore on, he stepped outside for air. The sky was moonless, but the parking lot lights cast a soft glow over the pavement. Far off, a bus rumbled past. A few cars idled nearby as people wrapped up drive-through orders from the late shift next door. Harold was sitting on the bench again, sipping from a to-go cup. He looked up when Xavier approached. "You're still here?" Xavier asked. Was waiting for the crowd to clear. "Heard there was cake. Missed your chance. They took the last slice 10 minutes ago." Harold smiled. "I'll survive." They sat in silence for a while watching the storefront. The inside looked warm, alive. "You know," Harold said, "places like this, they don't just feed people." They hold them up when everything else is falling apart. I forgot that for a while, Xavier said. Took a disguise to remember. Harold looked at him. Then don't take it off completely. Xavier turned toward him. What do you mean, keep showing up, doesn't have to be undercover? Just be here, they'll feel it. He nodded slowly. Inside, someone turned up the music. A few voices rose in laughter. Plates clinked. The sound of a place no longer just functioning but thriving. Xavier stood, brushing off his hands. I'll walk you to your car. Harold rose carefully. Appreciate that. They walked across the lot together, no rush to the steps. Just two men under the soft hum of parking lot lights, both knowing that something had shifted, not in the brand, not in the numbers, but in the people. And that finally was enough.